Hey everybody, welcome back to another Theory Fountain video. I don't think I've ever formally called one of these a Theory Fountain in the video, but they've all been in a playlist called the Theory Fountain since forever ago. So once you finish this, if you have a mind to check out some of my other rambling thoughts, definitely jump over and check out that playlist. There's some probably out of date ones, there's some map videos which tend to do very well, and then there are some really bizarre ones where I keep trying to tell people that there are 4 timelines and that Skyward Sword created a 4th timeline that we didn't really get to see because the creation of the Master Sword, when it was brought back in time and then put into the pedestal after Demise was defeated, created the timeline that we all know with the games that we have at the moment. Anyway, that's sorry, big spiel. I just finished playing Wind Waker over the weekend, Friday night, for like the 5th or 6th time, and we got to talk about it. I'm still processing this idea, but as I was finishing the game, there was some dialogue and some things that happened that made me go, whoa, hold on just a second. And so as I talk through this, I'm going to be developing this idea a little bit further with you, so thank you for being a sounding board. I don't think this was intentionally the way the game was made, but there is room with this idea for Nintendo to capitalize on it and do something with it if they wanted to retroactively, how they do with some things, like how Majora's Mask is now considered on the timeline. They could do the same thing with Wind Waker. So just bear with me, let me get to the crux of the proposed theory. So let's start with Link's Awakening. You all know Link's Awakening, right? The premise is that Link is riding through a storm and is caught in a temporal anomaly that's caused by the dream of the windfish, which is like kind of a demigod spirit animal thing. In this game, it's established that Link is actually kind of an antagonist to the inhabitants of the island, and that his success in waking the windfish will destroy the pocket dimension that was created within the dream. And so like at the end of this game, when you awaken the windfish, it's implied that all the inhabitants of Koholint Island just disappear, and that Link, who is a dimensional traveler, is the only one that remains at the end of the game, and maybe Merrin as a seagull. That's another theory. But I said this was a Wind Waker theory, right? Not a theory about Link's Awakening, so what's the relevance of going through that? Well, what if Wind Waker wasn't that different to Link's Awakening? The premise of Wind Waker is that it takes place... Hold on. Got the opening scroll of Wind Waker. So yeah, the backstory to Link's Awakening is that it takes place on a branch of the timeline where Link defeated Ganon with the help of Zelda at the end of Ocarina of Time. They sealed him away in the Sacred Realm, and then Link was sent back in time by Zelda to live out the life that he lost in this battle, and thereby creating a branch timeline. And eventually, sometime in the future, not knowing exactly how long that time is, but Ganon escaped from the Sacred Realm and re-emerged, or Ganondorf re-emerged rather, to seek out his revenge. With no Hero of Time available to save the people of Hyrule, they had to rely on praying to the gods and goddesses to deliver them from this evil. It's also implied that this timeline, the ruler of Hyrule, is a descendant of Zelda, whose name is Daphnis Norhansen Hyrule, more commonly, and I will refer to him now on, as the King of Red Lions. Everyone hoped that a hero garbed in green would return and save everybody from Ganondorf, however that never happened, so their prayers to the goddesses to save them resulted in, well, the flood, right? The goddesses flooded Hyrule and saved everybody by sealing Ganon away. That's what's implied, but that's not what is actually said here. It's not actually said on here at all either, because it cuts out the last little part, which is the most important. I mean, we the audience concur that the flood happened as a way to seal Ganondorf away, right? And it's kind of hinted at by what we see in the game and some of Ganondorf's dialogue. And it's also implied that the king who was turned into the King of Red Lions had some sort of secret bloodline that traveled all the way down to Tetra in the game, who turns out is Princess Zelda. Spoilers if you... Why are you watching this if you haven't played the game? But what if this inference, what if all of this thought process of the flood being the way that they sealed Ganondorf away is just speculation? That's what Ganondorf believes happened, is that there was a flood, but what if What if there wasn't actually a flood? I know it's crazy. We play through the game as Link. We can see Hyrule has been flooded. So what the hell am I talking about, and how does it relate to Link's Awakening? Some of you have already figured it out. In Link's Awakening, the Windfish had a dream that was powerful enough to suck Link into it, and potentially some wildlife that was in the general area as well. And then they all became assets within the dream. It's almost played off as if it was an accident or a mistake, that the Windfish just drifted off and made this world by some kind of divine fluke. What if the goddesses in Hyrule did something similar when it was time to seal Ganon away? Rather than flood Hyrule and doom everybody when Ganon re-emerged, what if they were able to slip him into a sleep and create a pocket dimension within his own dreams to hold him prisoner, to reconcile his evil, or just to hold him in some sort of purgatory while they waited for a hero to re-emerge? What if they sealed the King of Thieves within his own consciousness rather than sealed the whole land under an ocean? I know I can already smell the comments coming out now that I've suggested this. I can feel your fingers itching to tell me how mistaken I am. So can you just listen to some of my dumb points first, and then I'll move on to the more tangible evidence that I've found. First of all, if this whole thing was a dream, it would explain the really bizarre art direction of Wind Waker, how everything is a little bit different to a traditional Zelda game. If this was a dream, it would explain why everything is a little bit comical and otherworldly and bizarre in the art style. This is how Ganon imagines the world within his own subconscious. And then similar to Link's Awakening, the HD version at least, the art style with that was all cutesy like a child's toy or some sort of diorama. So again, in that theme of things being different to realistic real life, games that could potentially be dreams, a little bit more simplified. I know it's a cheap starting point to start this argument on, that the graphics, because it's arguable that it's just a style. It was just a choice. But if I don't say that, that's the reason. Somebody will say it in the comments, and I want to take full credit for that idea anyway. Now let's move on to the more intriguing aspects of this theory for me, and that's focusing on the dialogue that Ganon speaks right before the final battle in Wind Waker.
And he said,
"Do you sleep still?" It appears he's saying this line to Zelda. Like, Link's sneaking up on him and he's talking to her in the bed, which is kind of creepy uncle vibes. But then it's revealed that he's actually speaking to Link, because the next words he say are, "Wait, don't be hasty, boy." So is he asking Link if he is still asleep? Is he asking Zelda if she is still asleep? It's not 100% clear, but the implication is that Ganon might be becoming lucid in this point towards the end of the game, and is checking to see if anybody else within the dream is actually alive as well, or if they're all just part of his dream. And if he is nearing the end of the dream, it would spell his eventual awakening. He also mentions that he can see into Zelda's dreams, or he believes he can see into her dreams, and all he can see is oceans, oceans, oceans. So it's implied that everybody here is just dreaming about oceans, but maybe that's just a reflection of what he is actually dreaming about within his own dream, which he's observing at the same time as being in the dream. Dreams are weird. Zelda and Link's presence in Wind Waker, in this theory, is not the same as his appearance in Link's Awakening. In that game, he was a real person who was on a journey to Haladrim or whatever, and he got pulled in to a dream, and he was a real living person living within somebody else's dream. My proposal is that in Wind Waker, both Link and Zelda are not actually real people. They are creations of Ganon's subconscious based on his experience with the real Link and Zelda in the real world. And that's why Zelda is hidden as Tetra for so much of the game, because Ganondorf remembers her hiding and being sneaky, and he gives her a level of cunning for being able to elude him for 7 years, which he associates with a thief like himself, and that's why she is a pirate. Whereas Link, Ganondorf knew very little about him aside from the fact that he came from the south and he wore green, and so that's what we see with Link in this game. Mostly he's a blank character who's just there to rescue people, which is what Ganondorf would have seen, so he's created this kind of agent within his dream to act that part. Or arguably these two characters were assets of the goddesses put in there to test Ganondorf to see if he was ready to forgive them or move on from his evil plans. It could be that the goddesses just used Ganon's subconscious imagery of the children to make entities within the dream to guide the King of Thieves to the dream's final conclusion, or this was some kind of purgatory for him to test his resolve. I mean, Ganondorf definitely seems different in this game to other incarnations. If you look at the dialogue and the way that he conducts himself, he even says to Link, like, he doesn't need to kill him to take the Triforce from him, he just needs it to meet his ends. So he's kind of moved past that murderous rage that you see at the end of Ocarina of Time, and is it's a very different line of thought to how you see him in the end of Twilight Princess, where he was locked away before he even could enact his evil plans. So it's almost like we have him on the road to redemption here, which is interesting, and we'll hold on to that nugget of thought as we move forward. Earlier in the game, he seems to create conditions when Link first brings the Master Sword against him. So when he first sees the Master Sword, he states that it needs to have his power restored before he can fight him. And that's, for us, it just feels like one of those extending things that the game does. You know, you get the 3 spiritual stones, you think you're going to defeat Ganon, and then you're only just starting the game. It's like that similar kind of vibe that you get here, where you think you've got the Master Sword, you're ready to fight him, and then you find out there's actually another 2.5 temples to complete before you'll have the power to defeat him. And it could just be, again, you know that when you are in a lucid dream and you don't quite want to wake up and something's happening, and you can push it that little bit by creating these conditions of your own. It's almost like he's doing some lucid dreaming here and just putting conditions in that didn't exactly exist before, because the King of Red Lions should have told Link that the sword needs to be awakened before you can defeat Ganondorf. He surely would have known, because the sword was used to seal away his power, right? Would the king have not been involved in that process? Would he not have warned Link that removing the sword would remove the seal on Ganon's power? So it's like Ganon was creating a condition for himself within his dream that he became more powerful, and creating a condition that delayed Link from being able to defeat him because he wasn't quite ready to wake at this point of the game. You've all done that, right? When you're close to waking and you're becoming a little bit more lucid within your dream, and you might have something happen that wasn't what you wanted to have happen, and you can kind of rewind it and Thanos it with this time stone and you do it over. It's kind of the feeling I get from this scene, because it felt very inconvenient that this information wasn't available beforehand, because surely Ganon's magic he used that to break out of the sacred realm, right? So they must have sealed his magic away from him after that happened, and the king therefore would have been part of that conversation, I imagine. Back to the conversation between Link and Ganon. Ganon starts to question the narrative that we've all been told. What did the King of Hyrule say? He's questioning what the King of Hyrule said, that the gods sealed Hyrule away, and that they left behind people who one day would awaken Hyrule. Interesting choice of words. He then calls this ridiculous as well, perhaps because he's realized that he is the one who's sleeping, and that he's been kept from reality by this false world. Admittedly, he then infers that the remnants in Hyrule Kingdom don't possess the strength to be able to stop him, or to reawaken Hyrule or whatever, and he claims that the gods have destroyed them, which does sound like a generic evil bad guy Ganondorf line. But this isn't our generic evil Ganondorf. He does do things a little bit differently. It could just as easily, like in the context that we understand this line about claiming that the gods have destroyed them all, it seems like he's saying they were destroyed because the gods chose a path that would put them in peril, and that they'd never possess the strength to get out of. However, Link and Zelda do possess that strength. They are ready to do that, and they do it, as we see in the game. But in the context of this being a dream as well, it can be taken to mean that even if they succeed in stopping Ganondorf and killing him, that would end the dream, right? Which would then doom everybody within this pocket dimension. Similar to the vibes that we get from Link's Awakening. And then another interesting thing that happens is right at the end of this conversation, right before the battle begins, Ganondorf he takes the Triforce and he summons it, and he gets ready to make his wish. And then what happens? What happens when he's getting ready to make that wish? The King of Red Lions Daphne's Nosferatu Hyrule appears out of nowhere. This is the first time outside of the sword chamber in Hyrule Castle that we have seen him take the form of himself. And it's in Ganon's castle where I imagine he has no power at all. And he places his hand on the Triforce and beats Ganondorf. And this just reminds me so much of like when you're having a dream where you need to go somewhere and you're racing and you're not moving at all, or you are trying to punch somebody in the face and it's not doing them any damage, or you know, something happens that you just cannot, there are conditions within the dream that you cannot beat. There is no way that Ganondorf should have been outmaneuvered by a ghost of a king, but it happened. He appeared out of nowhere, touched it, and made the wish. So this is all kind of hinting to me that this is just Ganondorf's dream messing with him, moving the goalpost, changing reality so that he can't actually get what he wants in like the main thing that he wants in the context of this dream. The king even confirms with Ganondorf that the first to touch it gets the wish, confirming that these were Ganondorf's words, and again the conditions that the Gerudo King set within the construct of this dream. He's made this dream that the first to touch it gets the wish, not the person who constructs the Triforce, which Ganondorf just did. And that's why Ganondorf laughs maniacally, not because he's been beaten and he's lost the last vestiges of his sanity, because he's still composed, he's still mentally fine. He's laughing because he gets it. He understands at this point that it is just a dream, and that he now needs to wake up. So he plays out the final steps of the battle in a very lackluster way. He lets these two children get the better of him, and he hardly uses his full strength, not even resorting to the magic that he had awoken. He literally just fights Link with two swords, rather than using any of his beams that we know he's capable of using. He speaks to Link about his home in Gerudo and how it was scoured by wind day and night, and that all he wanted to do to protect it. In the context of the game, this humanizes Ganondorf. We see that what he tried to do, what he set out to do in Ocarina of Time, was help people. He wasn't just trying to destroy, and it makes him, like, it puts everything into a very grey area as to whether or not there is good and evil, or whether there's just the interests of the Gerudo and the interests of the Hyrule, and where Link fits into that. And that would have been a really interesting thing to explore, but then Twilight Princess came out and he was just evil again. Hopefully Tears of the Kingdom does him better. But in the context of this theory, Ganondorf is just redeemed. He's redeemed himself in the eyes of the goddesses, giving this revelation, you know? He's just trying to help. He didn't want to end up destroying or hurting anybody. He was trying to make things better. And with that revelation comes the idea that he is now redeemed, kind of like an Anakin Skywalker Darth Vader thing right at the end there. And that maybe now he is ready to finally wake up. He even says to Link and Zelda, let's end that which binds us together, which if we think about thematically what that could mean, it could mean destroying the curse of demise, which might be what he was trying to set out to do once he awoken, or it could just be that he realized that they were all just in this dream together, and to end the dream would end that what bound them together as well. And he attempts to make the wish within the dream to give Hyrule to him, as in the real Hyrule outside of the dream, give it back to him, as in let him physically return or consciously return to Hyrule. The fact that his wish was stolen from him, or that Link and Zelda beat Ganondorf, are inconsequential to him. He set out to show them what hope they would have, because if they defeated him, in his mind, he will wake and they will cease to be. So when he is finally defeated and the Master Sword is shoved into his head, he says one final line. He says, "The wind is blowing." The wind, which was ever present. The wind which was scouring the Gerudo Desert day and night, which drove him to do what he was meant to do in Ocarina of Time. The wind. He can feel the wind blowing. Why is this important? Because this game is the Wind Waker. It's in the title. The wind is literally what he senses now that he's awake. He's stirring and he can feel the actual wind on his skin, so he is now awoken. Right? At this point in time, Ganon is becoming conscious to the real world. But where is he now exactly to be able to feel wind? Could he be contained within a chamber maybe, underground, which has just had the door open for the first time in 10,000 years, and two people are approaching him as he begins to stir and wake? Is he buried under the real Hyrule Castle, or with some ancient technology keeping him in his slumber? Has the curse of demise, the malice, taken over his body in the time that his consciousness was locked away, and upon his return, will the redeemed consciousness of Ganondorf try and undo the evil of the other half that has been spreading for thousands of years in which he slept?
Sweep over Hyrule. Eliminate this kingdom and her allies. Leave no survivors!
I'm just saying maybe. Maybe that's what's happening. It does say in the opening scroll of the Wind Waker, after all of this stuff, when it just goes to black text, that none now remain who know the legend of the kingdom when Ganondorf re-emerged. But perhaps his re-emergence in that golden age, in that time after they sealed him away, in which Zelda created her own bloodline that resulted in King Nosferatu, Daphne, that maybe his re-emergence was a calamity. Maybe there was technology widespread, and when he returned, he put all that in jeopardy. And so when all of that failed, the goddesses stepped in and put him to sleep. But then I hear you ask, what about Link and Zelda and Wind Waker? There's an end credit scene. They're seen floating in the ocean above Hyrule. They go back to Outset Island, and then they go on to have other adventures in Phantom Hourglass and also in Spirit Tracks. So how could that happen if he woke up and they all disappeared, like at the end of Link's Awakening? I feel like it comes down to the wish. So within the pocket dimension that was created, the Triforce was a real Triforce. It was created in the likeness of the Triforce in the real world. So if somebody within the dream world made a wish, I believe that wish could be fulfilled. Especially if this dream world was created by the goddesses, their power would seep into it, and some of that would become a reality within that pocket dimension. The wish that the King of Red Lions made created a future for the children. On some level, as Ganondorf awoke to the truth of the dream, his enemy, the King of Hyrule, also became aware, as if the king was really just one aspect of Ganondorf's subconscious, and knew that together they would awaken. So the king's wish solidified the dream realm as its own dimension, its own version of the world. The game then sits on the adult timeline, but it's as its own mirror or other realm of that timeline and that Hyrule. The real Hyrule on that timeline we've never actually seen or experienced beyond what aspects were pulled out of it into Ganondorf's dream. The goddesses were forced to play their hand and seal him away within his own subconscious, and in doing so he created his own fractured universe of Hyrule. And because of the wish that the king made within that fractured universe, it now exists in its own right after the architect of it was removed and was able to wake up. And therefore Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks have spun on as that universe progresses in its own unique tangential way? It's on a tangent. It's a tangent universe. And so as that spirals off on its own, Ganondorf is left to reawaken in his own real timeline. And maybe that timeline is Breath of the Wild. Like I said, it's a crazy theory. And now that I've talked through this, I do think I've convinced myself that there is some, like I said at the beginning, don't think this was ever intentional, but I do think Nintendo has given themselves license to use this, like what they did with Majora's Mask. If you look at timelines in more recent books, whatever those things are, they now play off Majora's Mask as being a dream that Link had, or taking place within a dream world. So Termina doesn't exist. That sucks. They could easily do the same with Wind Waker if it's no longer convenient to have a giant ocean as part of the timeline. Or there could just be a fourth timeline that Breath of the Wild takes place on from Skyward Sword, because time travel exists there and things are changed, just like in Ocarina of Time. Just saying. I think I've convinced myself anyway that this theory could be tangible. Hopefully you've found it interesting or informing. If not, I've got other theories. You could check them out here and here. I'll chuck them up. There's one here. What have I got? Zelda went to Termina in the adult timeline? Maybe. This one's really outdated, so I need to go back and do some work on that one. What's another good theory that I thought of? Let's look at the Wind Waker map video. I'll pop that up here as well. You can check that out. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Unoriginic. I will see you guys again really soon with some more Zelda content, because Tears of the Kingdom's coming out real soon.